Today I'm going to be talking about Penelope Bourbon, a brand with beautiful packaging and a diverse portfolio of different labels that has absolutely exploded in popularity in recent years. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Brian Donnelly. I'm an expert in distilled spirits with 9 years experience in the alcoholic beverage industry, and my goal is to educate consumers more about the alcoholic beverages they enjoy so they can make better shopping and drinking decisions. I made a video in the past where I explain all the intricacies between all the different labels and how they're different and how they're made. But I did not do any tasting in that video. And one bit of feedback I received is that customers were interested in me actually tasting these products and talking about my tasting experience with them. I'm very familiar with the Penelope brand. So for this video, I selected 4 labels from the Penelope brand. That's the Penelope 4-grain, which is the white label, the new Penelope Wheated, as well as the Penelope Rosé Cask Finish, and the Penelope Barrel Strength. I'm going to taste through all 4 products here on camera. I'm going to compare the official tasting notes from the brand with my own thoughts. I'm going to check the average retail price for these products in my home market, and I'm going to let you guys know the most important question: are these products worth the money? All right, let's get into it. If you're interested in watching my previous video on the Penelope brand, I'll leave a link below in the description. If you're enjoying this content but don't care about the video component of these videos, I highly encourage you to check out my podcast. It's just the audio component of these videos, and you can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you consume your podcasts. I'll leave a link below in the description. All right, let's cover a little bit of backstory. The Penelope brand was founded by Michael Palladini. Michael and his wife Carrie struggled to conceive a child, and when they found out that Carrie was finally pregnant and would give birth to a girl, they decided to name her Penelope. Michael wanted to be able to celebrate this special moment every single day, so he partnered with his lifelong friend, Danny Palisi, to create a bourbon brand. Initially, the duo sourced whiskey from MGP, or Midwestern Grain Products, a distillery in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, which is now rebranded as Ross and Squibb. In order to differentiate themselves from other brands distilled at MGP, the duo sourced a unique blend of 3 bourbon mash bills. That initial product became the Penelope 4-grain, also known as the white label, which is still the brand's flagship product to this date. And here's what the bottle looks like for the 4-grain white label. As you can see, all the Penelope have this really sleek kind of wine bottle style packaging. And then, the big P, the really clean labels. Everything about this brand just looks super clean, looks really beautiful, and you can see that kind of common design thread through all the different products, no matter what they are. Again, I'll talk more about this particular product here in a moment when I actually get a chance to taste it. But when I talk about what the brand was built on, it was built on this particular product. MGP, who also is the parent company for spirit supplier Luxco, eventually ended up acquiring the Penelope brand, which gives Michael and Danny the ability to access older barrels and elevate their production. Michael is still very involved in all the different innovations that the brand does, and Danny has maintained his position as master blender. All right, so here's the Penelope 4-grain, or often referred to as the Penelope white label. Penelope now has a huge portfolio with a bunch of different labels. They're all very, very different, but everything was built on the Penelope 4-grain, or this white label. And you can see there's a common packaging and design element that runs through all the different Penelope products. It has this super clean packaging with this kind of wine-shaped bottle and the easily recognized P logo. I did a write-up on my website about the Penelope portfolio, and I'll leave a link below in the description if you're interested in reading that. But I'm just going to read what I wrote about the Penelope 4-grain. The 4-grain label is the Penelope brand's entry-level and flagship product. It offers an easy drinking, lower proofed option, which is perfect for entry-level consumers or whiskey novices. This product is a blend of 3 bourbon mash bills that contain all 4 grains and have an average mash bill of 75% corn, 15% wheat, 7% rye, and 3% malted barley. This is something that's super important to understand about the Penelope brand. The Penelope brand will tell you the mash bill for every single one of their products. But unlike, I guess, more traditional bourbon brands, this mash bill is actually an average. So, again, Penelope wanted to distinguish themselves from the other brands produced at MGP, now Ross and Squibb. So when they provide you the mash bill, that is the average mash bill. That's the average corn, average wheat, average rye, average malted barley of the 3 mash bills. When Jack Daniels says our mash bill is 80% corn, 8% rye, 12% malted barley, that is their mash bill. There's no other mash bill. That's not an average. That's just what their mash bill is. This bourbon is distilled at the Ross and Squibb Distillery in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, aged for a minimum of 36 months in new American oak barrels with a number 4 char for the barrel staves and a number 2 char for the barrel head. It's non-chill filtered and bottled at 80 proof or 40% ABV. Enough talking about it. Let's actually taste it. I have a brand new bottle here. All right, I'm going to reference the official tasting notes from the brand. So, the aroma is described as balanced corn sweetness, caramel, light oak, syrup, dynamic aroma profile with slightly savory notes. Now that's an interesting description. I would say this has a very classic bourbon aroma, but it's toned down a bit. You know, it's not quite so expressive. You know, considering that this is really meant as an entry-level product, entry-level flavor profile, it should be no surprise that there's going to be a lot more restraint on those kind of classic bourbon flavors. Balanced corn sweetness, caramel, light oak. You know, I definitely could see that. Slightly savory note. I don't know if I'm quite getting that, but then again, that really stereotypical big vanilla, big baking spices smells, those aren't really jumping out of the glass to me. So, you know, maybe in the absence of those kind of stereotypical sweeter flavors, you know, that kind of savory, you know, that's how they're kind of describing this. But the body is described as fruit, syrup, candied sweetness, and a savory vanilla note with slight berry and citrus. I'm excited to revisit this one again. That's good. That's really good. Again, you know, first thing I've had to drink today. Initial impressions on that first sip, and then again, I'm going to take a second sip. Very restrained. You know, good flavor, but very restrained. I wouldn't say muted, like the absence of flavor. I would just say that there's good flavor here with a bit of finesse, but everything is kind of dialed back. And again, if they want this to be super approachable, easy drinking, inclusive from kind of all palates, then you know they may have hit the nail on the head here, because there's good flavor here, good kind of classic bourbon flavor, but it's not dialed up, you know. And I have a feeling when we get to some of these other expressions, especially when we get to the barrel strength, you know, I have a feeling those kind of stereotypical bourbon flavors are going to be really dialed up. But again, also keep in mind this is a 4-grain. You know, you don't see a ton of 4-grain bourbons available on the market. You know, just to clarify what that means is there are 4 grains that are stereotypically used for bourbon production. You have corn, of course. By law, bourbon has to be a minimum 51% corn by mash bill. Typically, there's rye. You know, rye is a good flavor spice, a good balancing spice for corn. And then malted barley is typically just there for enzymatic purposes, for the purpose of aiding fermentation. What is very popular is to have a wheated bourbon, you know, from brands like Maker's Mark, Weller, Pappy Van Winkle, and that is where you're replacing all the rye with wheat. Wheat is a softer grain. In my opinion, it doesn't provide as much flavor. That's a bit controversial. But again, it creates something that's very soft, very easy drinking, very approachable. And having a 4-grain is interesting, where you're having not just the spice and flavor of rye, but the softness of wheat. And so you're getting, you know, if it's done well, you're getting all the different benefits from that all the different grains provide. So I'm going to revisit this fruit, syrup, candied sweetness, and a savory vanilla note with slight berry and citrus. This is 80 proof or 40% ABV. Not boozy at all. Very soft and easy on the palate. Again, good flavor. I would say there is that fruit, slight berry, citrus. You get some of that. You're getting some, classic vanilla and classic bourbon flavor. This very much highlights the fruit end of the spectrum rather than the baking spice end of the spectrum. And I think it's really nice. And again, I think one of the most important things is this product enjoyable? This is very enjoyable to drink. It's very easy to drink. The finish is described as slight buttercream icing, cornbread finish with lingering vanilla spice. The finish isn't overly long on this. Slight buttercream, cornbread, lingering vanilla spice. I don't know if I'm quite getting that, but it's got a very pleasant finish. Short, but pleasant. And I would say the finish is in line with the flavors that you receive on the palate. So again, if I'm thinking who's this product for? This product is for anyone that is perhaps getting interested in getting into premium bourbon. We'll talk about pricing here in a second, but I think for anyone that maybe wants to get into premium bourbon, and you're maybe coming from other spirits categories that aren't quite as bold, or you're not drinking spirits at all, I think this would be a perfect option. I think this would be a perfect option for the female demographic or the female palate. Not that women don't love bourbon, but stereotypically, if women are not drinking bourbon and they want to get into bourbon or start drinking more bourbon, I think this would be a beautiful option because it's so approachable, and with the way they structured the flavor profile, it could be super, super versatile. I mean, I think you could still put this in some good whiskey cocktails, and I think you could do mixed drinks as easy as adding soda or adding a little bit of lemonade. Or something more complex. So I think this product is relatively versatile, and again, super easy, super drinkable, super approachable. So let's talk pricing. I live here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, so I'm going to be quoting average retail price for my home market, but every single market's different, so please check your local liquor store for pricing. So the 4 grain is going to retail my market somewhere between $27 and $29. So do I think this is worth it? I do. You're $30 or under. You're getting a beautiful packaging. You're getting an interesting and drinkable and tasty bourbon. Again, this is a very specific style of bourbon, right? For anybody that is looking for that really big bourbon flavor at this particular price point, maybe this isn't for you. You might want something like Four Roses or Old Forester that is a little more traditional and robust and big and bold. But if you want something that's a little more finesse driven and is very, very approachable, then I think for call it $27 and $29, I definitely think this would be worth the money, and you would not be disappointed. The next product I'm going to taste is actually the newest release from the brand, or at least the newest release that is available every single day, and that is the Penelope Wheated. You still have the sleek kind of wine style bottle, but now you have a yellow label for the Penelope Wheated. When this product was first introduced, it was very confusing for consumers because the Penelope Wheated is a 4 grain bourbon that contains wheat. And so people are wondering, okay, if the Penelope 4 grain or the white label is also a 4 grain bourbon that contains wheat, how are these products different? So that's one of the things I definitely wanted to highlight when I talk about this product. The mash bill for the Penelope Wheated is 74% corn, 16% wheat, 7% rye, and 3% malted barley. So just an absolutely tad more wheat in the mash bill than the 4 grain or the white label. Now remember, with Penelope, this is an average mash bill. This is not the set mash bill. Remember, if they're blending multiple different bourbon mash bills, this is the average. It's still a 4 grain mash bill, but it's going to have just a tad more wheat than the Penelope 4 grain. Now, that's not the only difference. So the other differences are the Penelope 4 grain was aged a minimum of 36 months, whereas the aging on the Penelope Wheated is going to be between 4 and 6 years. The proof on the Penelope 4 grain was 80 proof or 40% ABV. The bottling proof on the Wheated is going to be 95 proof or 47.5% ABV. So, you have, more or less a similar mash bill, but what you're getting is a product that is slightly older. and bottled at a slightly higher proof. And that's going to make a big difference, I'm sure. I tasted this product when it was first launched in my market, and I'm excited to revisit it. So you may be wondering, like, why did they do this? Like, why did they create a product that seems so similar to something else that already existed? Well, as I mentioned earlier, wheated bourbons are super, super popular. Brands like Maker's Mark, Weller, Pappy Van Winkle. I know there are others, but those are the kind of big three that come to mind when you talk about wheated bourbon. And so customers love wheated bourbon. It's a very popular style of bourbon. It's not my favorite. Personally, I really like high rye bourbon. It's no surprise that Penelope brand wanted to come up with an option to specifically target wheated bourbon drinkers. And I want to give you guys a closer look at the packaging. So you can see it's highlighting non-chill filtered. Again, the Penelope 4-grain was also non-chill filtered. It's highlighting the 4-grain, the bottling proof. I have a fresh bottle here, so let's taste it. The official tasting notes from the brand are an aroma of light oak, sweet corn, apple, and pear. I can definitely see a slight difference in aroma compared to having just smelled the 4-grain, but it's not a dramatic difference. Light oak, yes. Sweet corn, I honestly could see it. Apple pear, again, we're kind of erring on the fruitier side of the bourbon flavor spectrum versus that, I feel like a lot of brands fall in that heavy, heavy baking spice, clove, cinnamon, nutmeg, where this is more kind of apple pear. I could definitely see that. All right, the body is described as vanilla, honey, caramel, apple, and a hint of orange zest. Oh yeah, ton of flavor compared to the 4-grain. I mean, that bump in proof, bump in age statement, you can really taste it just right off the bat. Vanilla, honey, caramel, apple. Not sure about the caramel apple, but vanilla, honey, a bit of fruitiness. That hints of orange zest, that might be spot on. All right, I'm going to revisit this. This particular product coats your mouth a lot more, and there's just so much more flavor there. This is a lot more, bold compared to the 4-grain. This is really nice. That proof, it feels a little, and I like high proof bourbon, anything 100 proof or above, but having come from the 80 proof, that you definitely feel that little bump in proof, but it's pretty well integrated, and it doesn't interfere with the flavor. It's not just all booze, all heat. The bottling proof is very well integrated, and there's good flavor. It really coats your mouth, and I can just feel it hanging around a lot longer. The finish is a lot longer than the 4-grain. Speaking of finish, the finish on this is described as lingering brown sugar, toasted oak, and a touch of cinnamon spice. So they're saying that kind of cinnamon, sugar, toasted oak, they're going more on that kind of baking spice, barrel flavors. Definitely a much longer finish than the 4-grain. I'm still not getting a ton of that kind of cinnamon and baking spices, but again, it's a very nice finish, and it's a finish that works really well with the initial flavors you kind of taste on your palate. And yeah, it's still kind of hanging around, good finish, sign of quality. As I said, I stereotypically don't like wheated bourbon. So for a bourbon that, it's not a real wheated bourbon because there is still rye in there, it's a 4-grain, but, they're trying to highlight the wheat, and it's still got a certain softness to it that I think is stereotypically found in wheated bourbons. But, the fact that it has some rye and, is aged 4+ years, they're saying this is bottled between 4 and 6 years. I think it's mature enough that, it is really enjoyable on the palate. So let's talk pricing. So In my home market, this product should retail somewhere between, let's call it $32 and $35. So do I think it's worth it? I definitely do. I mean, you're looking at a product that is just above 30 and you're getting, quite a bit more of an age statement and a lot more flavor. I think this product is definitely worth the money. Now, this product I feel like could still be enjoyed by a consumer that is looking for that kind of easy finesse from the 4 grain. But we're starting to get more in the territory of, like, you're an established bourbon drinker, you have certain expectations. I think you could definitely enjoy this. If I'm a stereotypical makers or Weller drinker, I definitely think you would enjoy this product. I think it's got enough of that kind of weeded characteristic that people already drinking weeded bourbon would really like it, and that bump and proof, bump and age statement, generates enough flavor and enough complexity that I think this could perhaps target a more serious bourbon drinker. And again, I'm tasting 4 products today. This is just the second product. So we still have the rosé finish and we still have the barrel strength. So again, Penelope has this really diverse portfolio, and it's definitely a spectrum. There's lighter, easier stuff, more entry level stuff. There's more complex stuff. There's higher proof stuff. There's stuff with barrel finishings. There's stuff without barrel finishings. And so the idea is that it's this big bourbon spectrum. And then depending on your desired flavor profile, or depending, what you're particularly interested in, you can find a product on the Penelope spectrum that kind of meets that. All right, that's it. Part 1 of my Penelope tasting series. Is it worth the money? Again, on this channel, I'm going to highlight value. And so, I hope to revisit some of the other options from the Penelope brand. But I want to start with these 4. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you learned something. Please give this video a like and consider subscribing. If you would like to be notified whenever I have new content on my website or this YouTube channel, please consider subscribing to my email newsletter. I'll leave a link below in the description. If you'd like to support this channel further, please consider becoming a Patreon member or gift me a cocktail through the link below in the description. And finally, if you have feedback, recommendations, products you would like to see, information you want to know, please send me an email. I personally read every single email I receive. I do my best to respond to all the emails that I can. And it's this kind of feedback that has shaped this channel. So, originally, I just wanted to talk about the information behind the brands. And because of feedback from viewers, they said, what is information about whiskey or about distilled spirits without tasting them, which was a great reminder that I needed to hear. And that is how this whole tasting component developed on this channel. That is where this, the series that I like to think of, is it worth the money? Where I taste a product and view the average retail price in my market and let customers know, is this worth the money? Developed from viewer feedback, which I'm very grateful for. Thank you so much again for watching. Please leave a comment. Please shoot me an email. And as always, please drink responsibly. Cheers.